Today's episode is brought to you by We Break You Buy. Interested in sports cards and memorabilia? Check out We Break You Buy on TikTok. We Break You Buy is a small operation run by three brothers, offering spots for a chance at winning some incredible sports cards and memorabilia. That's We Break You Buy. Check it out today on TikTok. Of Why Wasn't It Better? I am your host, Patrick Darms.
And I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
Just us today, no guest.
Yep. The dynamic duo back to a classic Pat and Anton episode.
It's been a while.
It has, and we're excited to dive in today to a fun anniversary film, right?
No. I mean, technically it's always the anniversary of a film, but no, it's not a special anniversary.
No, it is not.
But it is the anniversary of the thing that this movie is about.
Which is very important.
Yes. That may be a first for the podcast. And that's something we have never really kept track of until now. It's like, are any of the films we cover historical? And is it the anniversary of the thing that the movie's about?
Wasn't it the anniversary of when Matt Damon went to the future to go to the planet of the apes?
Do you mean Mark Wahlberg?
Sorry, yeah, Mark Wahlberg.
It's like, what movie are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, that film.
Have we even covered anything with Matt Damon in it yet? Oh, we have Ocean's 12.
Yes, we have.
Maybe something else, but at this point, we've done enough episodes where we're starting to lose track. Up until this point, we've been calling back to previous episodes like, hey, remember when we talked about U.S. Marshals or True Lies or something else? It's like we're past 80 episodes at this point. It's going to get harder and harder.
Yeah, and each one has its own special flavor, and that's just so much fun being able to go over each film.
Oh, yeah. We eventually may redo some episodes, actually, which was a listener question, and it's something we're going to be doing occasionally on the Patreon, I believe.
Right. And that'll be fun. But today we have a new episode.
We do. Today's episode is new. And if you're hearing this, it's new to you. Unless you like to re-listen to episodes, which is great because it gives us more stats.
Well, what do we have today for our listeners, Pat?
Today is Valkyrie, which is a film that came out in 2008. However, it is about the July 20th plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler, which happened in 1944. 80 years ago. It's the anniversary of that. And we figured since anyone trying to kill Adolf Hitler is inherently a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we should celebrate it by covering the movie that dramatized its events.
And to be fair, or just to point out, it wasn't the only attempt to assassinate Hitler.
No.
Yeah.
But it was one that came the closest, and it's certainly the most famous.
And it is one that featured Tom Cruise.
At least in the movie.
As far as we know.
Although, if you go by those pictures, he looks so much like Stauffenberg.
Yeah.
It's pretty uncanny. This is one of those roles where you may argue about the quality of Tom Cruise's performance, but it's like, okay, if you don't want Cruise in this role, he looks so much like Stauffenberg that it's like you can't really cast anyone else in the role. Like, I understand why he was chosen to do this.
And we'll go over more about Tom Cruise as a reason for this film, but I feel like it's good to just kind of tease that a bit.
Yeah. Look, anything involving Tom Cruise is inevitably going to be interesting to talk about, right?
Yeah.
What was the last Cruise film we discussed on the podcast? Was it The Last Samurai? Or am I blanking on something?
I want to say it was
nothing last season, right?
No, maybe it was The Last Samurai.
I think it was. Yeah, I think so, because we did Mission Impossible.
Wait, was it
Eyes Wide Shut?
Yeah, you're right. Okay, then it was The Last Samurai.
Yeah. Eyes Wide Shut was after Last Samurai.
Oh, there we go.
It's so weird. Like, you don't ever, if when you think of Tom Cruise movies, Eyes Wide Shut is not one of the first that usually come to mind, but it's certainly one of the most like high profile films he's been a part of.
He's also been in a wide range. So I feel like when you think of that wide range and what he's famous for, it's in a lot of different genres.
Not only a wide range, it's crazy to think he's been in movies for 40 years.
And he still looks as young as ever.
He does. He looks great. I'll give the man credit. I don't know what kind of money he's investing in his body, LeBron James esque, but he's doing a great job.
He'll tell you it's just he drinks lots of water and puts on sunscreen.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, we have so many guests at this point that I actually look forward to these solo or these, not solo, that would be one person, but I actually look forward to these classic episodes where it's just you and I.
Yeah, same. And
They're few and far between at this point, my friend.
I will say it's always fun to get that flavor injection with a guest during episodes. I think that's fun
Oh,
for
yeah.
any podcast to have a guest. But yes, let's have some fun with a Pat and Anton episode.
Today's film is Valkyrie.
A dramatization of the July 20, 1944 assassination and political coup plot by desperate renegade German army officers against Adolf Hitler during the latter stages of World War II. Released on December 25th, 2008 by MGM, United Artists, Cruise Wagner Productions, Bad Hat Harry Productions, and Studio Babelsberg Motion Pictures. Directed by Bryan Singer, screenplay by Christopher McQuarrie and Nathan Alexander, starring Tom Cruise, Kenneth Branagh, Bill Nighy, Eddie Izzard, Terrence Stamp, Tom Wilkinson, Kevin McNally, and Carice Van Houten. A budget of $75 million, so $108 million adjusted for inflation, and box office of $201 million, so $289 million adjusted for inflation. Pat, why was this movie chosen?
This movie was always on our list. However, due to it being the 80th anniversary of the July 20th plot, we decided to move it up. It was the perfect excuse to really bump it up. So this is certainly a film that we would have covered eventually. This is an interesting movie for a lot of different reasons. Tom Cruise is one of the biggest movie stars of all time, so anything that he's in inherently will have a certain level of hype attached to it. This is one of those realistic movies because it's based on a true story, and yet at the same time, it's interesting to me personally, and I put it on our list because of how closely this flirts with alternate history, right? As someone who was a history major in college, and I consider myself an amateur historian, I don't like alternate history. There are plenty of alternate history books and films that you can get into. None of them really interest me. I think history by itself is far interesting enough without having alternatives to it. But Operation Valkyrie came so close to actually succeeding that it could have easily become alternative history. And I find that part of it interesting. Obviously, we know how this story ended, but the fact that the men involved came so darn close to succeeding alone makes the subject matter interesting. And the fact that they made a film out of it, I think, is really cool. Bryan Singer's legacy aside, he is always going to have a complicated legacy at this point. But I think it is important to remember that when this film came out in 2008, Bryan Singer was a very well regarded, highly thought of director in Hollywood.
Yeah, we discussed him quite a bit during our X-Men episode, so he's already come up recently this season.
He didn't even direct that movie, and we still discussed him.
Exactly.
This film was also released during the height of the media backlash against Tom Cruise. I think had this film come out 5 years before 2008 or 5 years after, it would have been a bigger deal. You know, when you introed it, you gave the box office numbers. 200 million on a $75 million budget.
No.
Not great.
No.
And my memory of this film, I saw it when it came out. I don't think I actually saw it in its theatrical run. Where I went to college, they would show movies that were leaving their theatrical runs, but before they were out on DVD, they would show them at the campus theater. And I believe that's how I saw this film. I remember liking it, but it kind of came and went. And this film does not seem to be very well remembered today. It's certainly not a film that you think of when you think of Tom Cruise. This is probably not one of the first 10 films that you'd list if you were ranking your Tom Cruise movies. It's one of those movies that I think if you're over 30 years old, you probably know what it is, but only after someone explains it to you. Like, Valkyrie, what's that? Oh, it's the World War II movie where Tom Cruise tried to kill Hitler. Yeah, it was okay. I think that would be most people's reaction to it. What do you think?
I think that that's a very fair assessment. I mean, even admittedly for myself, this was a movie that I totally missed. I saw it in the background when I think I was at like a party or at a friend's place, and it was just on the TV. And so I very casually just, again, it was on the background. So I feel like with the cast, Tom Cruise is the lead, and especially after the rewatch, you think it would have gotten more attention.
That's why I had it on our list from the very beginning of when you and I started the podcast. I always wanted to cover this one because, well, Cruise, you mentioned the rest of the cast. We haven't talked about the cast yet, but we will. It's a really good cast. And Bryan Singer and the subject matter, you just why wasn't this a bigger deal? Why wasn't this better?
Exactly.
Does it deserve reassessment? Is it an underappreciated Tom Cruise performance? Is this Bryan Singer's best film? These are some questions that I'm hoping we can answer on today's episode. All right, let's get into the production history of this film. So, the origins of Valkyrie go back to 2002 when Christopher McQuarrie visited Berlin while researching another project. He visited the memorial to Stauffenberg at the Bendler Block. Upon learning more about the July 20th plot, he was fascinated by the fact that the conspirators were fully aware of what would happen to them if they failed, and he wanted to make their story more well known. So he began collaborating with writer Nathan Alexander on a screenplay. McQuarrie sought to model the story after the 2001 HBO film Conspiracy, which depicted the Wannsee Conference at which the Nazis planned the final solution. Initially, he wanted to direct the film himself, but he realized he could only secure the budget he wanted with a bigger name at the helm. So he asked his longtime friend, Bryan Singer, to direct. And worth pointing out, McQuarrie won an Academy Award for screenplay for The Usual Suspects, which, of course, was directed by Bryan Singer. And another side note, Anton, if you've never seen the film Conspiracy, that HBO film with, coincidentally enough, Kenneth Branagh in it and a couple other actors that
Mhm.
appear in this film, it is a superb movie, and it is one that we are going to cover on the podcast.
Yeah, so it's one that I will eventually see.
I can't recommend it enough. Back to Bryan Singer. So he had just finished 3 major productions, X-Men, X2, and Superman Returns. He was interested in a smaller project. While he first tried to pursue the Superman Returns sequel, which never happened, he grew interested in McQuarrie's and Alexander's screenplay. To prepare, Singer read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Schreier to gain a deeper understanding of Nazi Germany's political landscape, and he also met with one of Hitler's bodyguards. It's pretty interesting.
Mhm.
Although McQuarrie sought for Valkyrie to be similar to Conspiracy, Singer had bigger ambitions for the film. He wanted it to be more than, quote, old men in rooms talking, end quote. Singer looked back on his decision saying, quote, the true story had all the makings of a classic assassination thriller. I knew if I could keep the audience with Stauffenberg, with his mission, they would go with the flow and be less inclined to start hypothesizing on things from history, end quote. McQuarrie suggested that they bring the project to United Artists partners Paula Wagner and Tom Cruise, who immediately agreed to finance the film in March of 2007. Singer asked Cruise to play the lead role, which Cruise accepted. Cruise had been provided a picture of Stauffenberg in which the actor noticed a similarity in his profile with the German colonel,
Mhm.
drawing him to the role. Now, the director and the screenwriter initially anticipated Valkyrie as a small film with a budget of under $20 million and to be completed within several months, but they realized that Cruise's involvement could broaden the film's publicity and naturally its budget. Also worth pointing out, this film is notable for being the beginning of Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie's creative partnership, which is still going strong today. McQuarrie has written and directed the action films Jack Reacher, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, Mission Impossible Fallout, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Part 2. Part 2, of course, comes out next year. He's also co-written or co-produced Edge of Tomorrow, Jack Reacher Never Go Back, The Mummy, and Top Gun Maverick.
What happened
So
with a mummy?
are we going to have to cover that one?
I think we're gonna have to.
I've never seen it.
Like, look, you have. It's so funny when you go through that list of films. Pretty good to like really good to what the
Very high
hell,
batting average.
like what the hell happened with the Mummy. But that is for a tale for another day.
Have you seen it?
I have. The only reason I watched it is because of how bad they screwed up that trailer reveal.
I don't even remember the trailer.
They included the wrong audio, or they mixed up the audio for like the trailer drop. And so
Seriously?
yeah, I'll find you. I'll see if I can find I'm sure it's online, the original trailer with a messed up audio. At first people thought like, oh, is this like an artistic decision? It's like, no, like a major studio messed up with the trailer reveal.
We're gonna have to cover a couple Mummy films.
Oh no, not the Jet Li one.
Oh, it's on the list, buddy.
Yeah, I know it is. So Macquarie and Alexander researched firsthand accounts, photos, newsreels, and texts, and they also examined Gestapo and SS records, as the organizations had been meticulous in reconstructing the events of the conspiracy and its aftermath. A timeline of events was created from which Macquarie and Alexander shaped the script. After production began in Berlin, the writers were able to visit locations and meet with relatives of the conspirators. These meetings informed changes made to the script during filming. Macquarie and Alexander found the most difficult task was in conveying the motives of the conspirators. Von Stauffenberg especially reimagined an enigma through the writers, though the writers believed he and the other resistance members to be propelled by their moral outrage. In June 2007, prior to production, a German defense ministry spokesperson said that filming of Valkyrie would not be allowed at the country's military sites if protagonist Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg was portrayed by Tom Cruise, due to the actor's adherence to Scientology, which is considered a dangerous cult by the German authorities. Later in the month, the ministry reversed its stance and welcomed production of Valkyrie. Cruise himself had a hand in convincing them. I'm sure it wasn't the missing hand he had on set.
I wonder if it was similar when we talked about Mission Impossible, how the French authorities refused filming of the CTV train, and Cruise, quote, like took them out to dinner, and they were like, sure, you can film there.
Wow, Tom Cruise is so friendly.
I think he can be very charming.
Yes. So regarding the rest of the cast, Branagh, McNally, and McNeice had also starred in Conspiracy, film that we covered earlier. So filming began on July 18, 2007 in Berlin, and around 70 sets were built for the film. A replica set of Hitler's Wolf's Lair was constructed 60 kilometers south of Berlin, though the headquarters' actual location was in modern-day northeastern Poland, and it took 12 weeks to build. Germany's finance ministry had originally denied the producers the right to film at Bendlerblock, explaining that the site should be treated as, quote, a place of remembrance and mourning, end quote, which would, quote, lose dignity if we were to exploit it as a film set, end quote. The producers were also denied a request to film at a Berlin police station by the department, citing adverse impact to the facility. The German government eventually had a change of heart concerning the Bendlerblock site and gave permission for filmmakers to film there. Cruise and Singer led a moment of silence before filming at the actual execution site. The memorial to the German resistance also helped filmmakers by permitting them access to their materials and documents. The opening sequence, set in Tunisia, was filmed in California and was the last thing filmed in October 2007. 2 authentic P-40 Warhawks were used. So additionally, a real Junkers U-52 was used during filming. That's a pretty rare plane nowadays. Fair enough, Pat. So usually film productions just use Ford tri-motors for that kind of plane. And kudos to production for going through the extra mile and using an authentic plane. Now, Sony Pictures Imageworks handled most of the visual effects. The majority of the 800 computer-generated effect shots were used to portray Stauffenberg's injuries. And despite post-production wrapping up by June 2008, the film would not be released until Christmas of that year. And we'll go over that more in a little bit. And that is the production history.
And before we talk about why wasn't it better, we are going to take a brief break as we hear from one of our sponsors. Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. Let's talk about Valkyrie. Why wasn't it better? Number one, poor marketing. We alluded to this at the end of the production history where we just left off, Anton.
Mhm.
The film's release date was changed multiple times. It was originally slated to be released on August 8th, 2008, then moved up earlier to June 27th, but then it was held off until October 3rd to avoid competition from Wall-E and Wanted. And then they postponed it again until December, where it ultimately was released on Christmas. This is like probably
Mhm.
one of the most unchristmassy Christmas releases I can think of. What about you?
I mean, I never had a history of thinking of Valkyrie during Christmas, but I feel like it's something to consider, especially with the heaviness of this film.
Yeah, I mean, just right off the bat, there are plenty of people that go to the movies around Christmas time, right? It's like, why would you want to go see a movie involving Nazis?
Sound of Music?
Did that come out around Christmas time? I don't know.
No, but why would you ever want to go see a film, that film? Well, despite the Nazis.
Right. There are Nazis in The Sound of Music. You're right. So the release date mix up, it was due to an internal strife at United Artists. They somehow viewed the production as troubled. It seems like the delay was also partially due to disagreements of where the Tunisian intro would be filmed. There was a lot of arguments about where this was going to be filmed. Obviously, as you mentioned, they eventually settled on California, but they were originally scouting locations in Jordan and Spain. I don't know how this could be a controversy over a filming location, but that's what the research tells us.
Also, I don't like one of the things I looked at for the marketing for this film was the original movie poster, and there's a lot in parallel with like usual suspects, which of course we mentioned Bryan Singer directed, and then it has like the very angled lines that are reminiscent of like a swastika. But at the end of the day, like I feel like it's not too memorable of a movie poster, so that didn't do it very much service either.
You know, looking back on it, I wonder now if the release date thing is one of the reasons why I was so about this when it came out. I don't remember when I first saw the trailer, but I remember thinking it looked good. Like, oh, that's subject matter. Because I mean, being the history buff that I am, I was aware of Operation Valkyrie, right? So
Well,
I was immediately drawn to this movie, but I just can't remember the ins and outs of like why I was so meh about it when I saw it.
Well, the same thing as well. When you watch the trailer, you look at the poster and think about the marketing in that aspect. I don't think it was packaged well for a December film. Nor was it really
No,
nor was
no.
it really packaged well to really be engaged as a thriller versus like a melodrama or a historical depiction that didn't have the same pace of a thriller, which it absolutely did.
Oh yeah. It really does seem like the marketing stuff is all due to the incompetence of United Artists. And look, United Artists is a legendary movie studio. They're not that active anymore for a lot of reasons. They have a lot of financial I don't even know if they technically are still around anymore or if they're completely swallowed up by MGM, which is of course now owned by
But
Disney. MGM's gone
or
bankrupt a couple different times. No,
I,
no,
I was gonna
Amazon.
say Amazon.
Amazon. Yeah,
Yeah.
not Disney. It's only a matter of time. No, I'm kidding. Disney can't afford Amazon.
It's only a matter of time, Apple.
Amazon might be one of the few things Apple can't afford,
Very true. I mean,
and vice versa. So the changing release date that drew a lot of criticism about the viability of United Artists for good reason. There was also a lot of concern about how to market this. Tom Cruise, he was playing a German, speaking with an American accent. That was a concern. So, an individual named Terry Press, she is a marketing consultant who works with studios. She said that Valkyrie had been wrongly labeled as, quote, the Tom Cruise eye patch movie, end quote. I want to highlight Terry Press because, Anton, remember the book I keep telling you about the men who would be king,
oh
about the
yeah,
history of DreamWorks? Terry
yeah.
Press is all over that book. She was a not an employee. She was a associate of DreamWorks during its foundation and heyday in the 90s and early 2000s. It was a name I recognized. As this December release date approached, United Artists launched a campaign to reform public perception of the film. This is all based on research. Obviously, you and I don't remember any of this. This is just what the research tells us. They were trying to downplay the role of Tom Cruise as a German war hero, and instead they were trying to pitch Valkyrie as a, quote, character-driven suspense thriller, end quote. The new campaign also played up the reputation of Bryan Singer. That's not going to age well. So Terry Press urged foregoing an awards campaign for the film. Cruise agreed with the consultant, while Bryan Singer was very disappointed. He thought this deserved awards consideration.
I think that it did deserve awards consideration, but them's the breaks.
So instead of leaning on the Tom Cruise name, they pivoted and they tried to make it seem like an ensemble piece directed by an experienced action director. And remember, as I pointed out when I was explaining why I chose this film, this was the height of the anti-Tom Cruise media stuff that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's easy to forget now, but there was a period of time in the 2000s when there was a public dislike for Tom Cruise somewhat.
Yeah, we're talking about the whole Scientology thing.
Yes. The Scientology thing. This was also around the time of the Oprah couch jumping incident. That was a couple years before this, but
that was a different level of just like discomfort with his character.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but was this also around the same time where he made the comments about Brooke Shields and psychiatry and
oh yeah, I remember
pharmaceuticals? It was weird.
Yeah. Tom Cruise has definitely had a very interesting history, especially in that time period in the 2000s. I think that despite a lot of the cancel culture that we've had with a lot of actors actually that we've touched on who have had like their brushes with controversy, Tom Cruise has actually come out pretty unscathed nowadays.
Deserved.
Yeah.
Okay. So this film, Valkyrie, it drew inspirations from World War II films like The Great Escape, Where Eagles Dare, a film we're covering, Patton, and Midway. And the filmmakers initially had a cut where the title cards would introduce characters and their roles. When the cut was screen tested with an American audience, the title cards were removed due to complaints that there were too many characters to follow. I really wish we had gotten the title cards. I'm usually not a fan of heavy-handed exposition, but I think title cards would have worked really well here.
Do you feel like it's just because for some folks that aren't as familiar with the history of it, it's just that can get lost really quickly?
I think it would have helped. There are a lot of characters in here.
There are, but I remember even thinking about it as a cohesive story, I'd argue that the characters that they wanted you to focus on, they let their stories develop. And then kind of surrounding characters, whether it's like Hitler's inner circle or those also involved with those aligned with the rebellion, we knew who the key players were. But I could see where additional exposition could have been helpful.
I think it would have been helpful, not necessarily for the characters' names, but their titles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you remember do you know the guy Keitel?
Yes. Yeah.
Most people will like, oh, Keitel, that's an easy name to remember. It's like, but who is he?
Mm-hmm.
I think what is he, the German chief of staff or whatever? The Army chief of staff?
Army chief of staff, because what's his name was the new chief of staff. Forget his name.
Not Stauffenberg.
No.
See, we're already getting confused. No, I think it would have been helpful because there's a lot of different factions here. You have the general, the Wehrmacht, right? This is the German army, and then you have the SS, which is a paramilitary wing of the German army who reports directly to Himmler, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you also have the reserve army, who Tom Wilkinson is in charge of. And then you have the German police. All of their uniforms look somewhat similar, but at the same time, there are distinct differences, all designed by Hugo Boss, notwithstanding.
Yes, that is a true fact.
Yes. It's also hard, I think, to watch these movies because I don't know how to say this without sounding awkward, but it's like they very clearly had the best looking military uniforms ever. Can we all agree on that? Like, damn, they made some good looking uniforms.
Now, listeners, I just want to point out here, it's more so just about the literal aesthetic. Nothing else to praise about.
No, nothing else to praise.
Yeah, proper placement. You can tell there's a lot of quality there. The coats.
It's like, it's all like You can tell it's all like the best quality wool and twills, and it's just like, man, they must have spent a fortune on just uniforms.
I would argue it was also at a time when there was also more care and attention put to clothing. So you could
Yeah.
also even say the same thing about like the British military and British clothing at the time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You can
So I'm
also thank the
yeah.
Nazis for ruining the leather coat.
Yeah. Jeez.
It's like I think before World War II, like the leather trench coat was probably a thing that people would wear, and just like the Gestapo just ruined that.
Well, until you had Connor McLeod of the Clan McLeod rocking that during Highlander.
I have to admit that's not the first or 10th thing that I would have thought of, but yes. Did he really rock that in Highlander?
The leather coat, yeah.
Well, I have to say, so like I think a regular length leather coat is still fine, what
Mhm.
you would call a jacket, but like a full length leather coat, you don't see anyone wearing that now.
Like a trench coat?
No,
No. No,
like
you
I said,
don't.
I think the Gestapo like killed that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I mean, what's fashion these days? People don't
I
really
don't
dress
know.
in coats that long anyway.
No, especially leather. It's expensive. A leather coat of that length would be like, I don't know, $1,500 now, right? At
Yeah.
least.
And like people spend that budget on like plain white t-shirts nowadays. Come on, Pat.
I have no idea how we've derailed the conversation like this, but I'm grateful for it. Look, we're just talking about Hugo Boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the title cards. I wish we had it. I wish they were used in Oppenheimer, like when we talked about that movie.
I remember that.
This has nothing to do with the marketing, but I wanted to include it. I really enjoyed seeing the MGM and United Artists logos at the beginning of the movie. It reminded me of classic James Bond.
Also just classic movie
Yeah.
or like yeah, right? Like this is also this is going to sound like I'm almost like a shill, but it's why I'm it doesn't hit quite the same when I see the new 20th century logo,
No,
right?
it's so lame.
It's like I get it. Just want to really step on Fox. Oh,
I
sorry.
understand why they can't use the Fox name anymore, but you're right. It does not hit the same. Have you gotten your dogs under control?
You know what it is? I think my wife just got home, so that's why they're acting up.
Oh,
I think she's stepping in right now, and that's why they're freaking out. So I'm going to go on mute if you want to go into the next
I will
reason.
go into the next reason.
Let's do it.
The next reason why this wasn't better is simply Tom Cruise. Despite looking very much like Stauffenberg, Tom Cruise is not the sort of actor who disappears into a role. I say this as someone who is a big Tom Cruise fan, but the lack of the accent was a source of criticism. And I mentioned this was released at the height of the anti Tom Cruise mania. This is one of the more criticized Cruise performances. You know, one of the major criticism being he does look a lot like Stauffenberg, but a lot of the critics said that he is unconvincing in the role.
Okay. First off, people. This is where I feel like a lot of people criticizing different acting philosophies or just different schools of acting. Not everything has to be method acting, right? It's not like Tom Cruise is not a method actor. And I feel like everything that I've seen Tom Cruise in, there is an element of his acting ability where no, he may not necessarily lose himself, but he's able to elicit the right emotion for the scene. And I feel like in that sense, I'd like to argue with critics of yesteryear and this year. I don't know. I disagree.
I see what you're saying. I'll say this. I agree with you that method acting is not always needed. And Tom Cruise is not a method actor. This is not one of his best roles. However, I think he does fine with it. At no point was I unsatisfied with his performance.
If they're going to knock him for not having the most authentic German performance, why not knock all the British actors for also not putting on a German accent?
That's why I will defend his performance in this film ultimately.
Yeah.
There is at least one German actor in this film who is speaking with a German accent, Thomas Kreitsch. Is it Kretschmann? Kreitzman?
Kreitzman.
Yeah. He's speaking with a German accent because he's a native German. But to your point, there's a bunch of British actors in this film, all of whom are speaking with various British accents. None of them got criticized for their performances. Why should Cruise be? Why would you single out Tom Cruise for this? Because he's Tom Cruise.
Because he went crazy on Oprah.
He didn't help himself with that couch jumping thing. No, I think, look, if you were to think of like your 5 best Tom Cruise performances, this is not one of them. At least it isn't for me. I think about A Few Good Men. I think about Rain Man, Jerry Maguire. Magnolia, any of the Mission Impossibles, Tropic Thunder. This
Risky Business.
Risky Bit, you could certainly put Risky Business in there. Born on the 4th of July, I think he's
Mhm.
amazing in that movie. This is not gonna be on that list, but that has more to do with how prolific his career is versus how I feel about him in this film. I think he's fine here. I think he does a good job in this film. To your point, he hits all the right emotions and all the right scenes.
For very serious subject matter played as a thriller, I think that Tom Cruise did a bang up job.
In the very beginning where you hear him speaking in German, pretty good German.
Pretty good. I mean, I'm not a linguist, so I can't give like a I'll give my layman's assessment.
I also like how the film sort of like Hunt for Red October-y. It sort of like began with him monologuing in German and it sort of morphs into English.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good, nice touch from Bryan Singer. I would say this has less to do with Cruise, but I don't even know why I included this under the Tom Cruise reason. But listeners know how our podcast goes at this point. We just sort of we drift in and out of reasons occasionally.
Yeah.
The film does take liberties with its storytelling. I think particularly how it depicts the quote unquote heroes here. It does make it out like Stauffenberg, the plot was based on some moral stand against the Nazis and their atrocities. And that's not really true. In reality, it was because a group of senior Wehrmacht officials believed that Hitler was losing the war, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was always going to be tricky, right? I think for Singer and the rest of the filmmakers involved. How do you make a movie about a group of people who are inherently Nazis, right? I understand they're not like Nazis because they make a point to tell us the audience of like
Mm-hmm.
how much they're not Nazis and how much they don't like what Hitler is doing to Germany. It's like, okay, but you have swastikas on your uniform
Right.
regardless.
It was at least the film didn't completely change it as though he was always a reluctant Nazi. Like that wasn't the case. And I feel like that's just a complete like rewriting of history then at that point. But this was also at a time, right, where either you were with them or you were out. And so if we feel like we're trying to go for the historical accuracy of it, more clearly it's the fact that it was the brutality and the fact that they were losing and he was just being disillusioned is why he went with the decision that he did.
Yeah, Stauffenberg is an interesting historical figure. He was a member of like the old school Germanic militaristic nobility.
Stauffenberg was old money.
He was old money, and to describe the real historical Stauffenberg, you'd have to go back to the German Empire, which of course basically fell apart at the end of World War One in 1918. He did not like the death camps and the action groups, like the Einsatzgruppen.
Mm-hmm.
He was definitely opposed to everything that Hitler was doing. It was not because he cared about Jews or Poles or Russians. He felt that mass murder made Germany look bad. And if you're Stauffenberg, in your perfect world, other countries were supposed to be recognizing the noble superiority of the German race and follow them into the future or some kind of thing like that. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I have
Mm-hmm.
done a bunch of reading about Stauffenberg and this plot. Basically, one of the things that Hitler did when he rose to power in Germany was he needed to get this old school German militaristic nobility on his side to help him seize power, and he did. So Stauffenberg and others, they initially thought that Hitler was providing this kind of leadership, but he eventually came to see Hitler as an unworthy, ultimately thought that Hitler was going to lose them the war because of his decision making. Now, obviously, with the benefit of
Mm-hmm.
hindsight, we know that Hitler was an extremely irrational decision maker, particularly when it came to military tactics and campaigns. Like, this is the guy who made the decision to invade Russia, which never really works out well for anybody historically. So to get back to Stauffenberg, and I realize I'm rambling here, and I'll wrap this up now. He was an elitist. He was probably not a very good guy, but he certainly was not a Nazi supporter who advocated the mass murder of Jews and others. and lumping him into that category would be a mistake. But at the same time, he was not a hero, even though he happens to
Mhm.
be the protagonist of the story.
To paraphrase, because he lost his hand in his eye, he wanted to kill Hitler. All right, next next thing.
It's a complicated way to tell the story, right? And I think it was very challenging for Singer and the screenwriters, because how do you make this guy the main character of your film knowing that he has a swastika on his uniform?
Mhm.
I think they did a really good job with it. They do not go into any melodrama. They do not make him into any kind of a sanctimonious
No.
hero. I think they did the best job that they could with it. But here's what's interesting historically. I don't know if the players involved in this plot realized this. Maybe they were in total denial. But by July of 1944, when they hatched this plot, right, when they actually pull the trigger and attempt to kill Hitler,
Mhm.
Germany was guaranteed to lose the war by this point. Maybe they didn't think that, but by this point, Stalingrad is well over. On the Eastern Front, Germany is very much on the defensive. The Russians are pushing them further and further west towards their own borders, and D-Day had already happened on the Western Front. Germany was doomed. I don't know if the film makes this explicitly clear, but one of the things historically the conspirators wanted to do, they wanted to assassinate Hitler, and their hope was, hopefully we can negotiate a truce with the Allies. We can keep our current borders. Hopefully, they will let us keep Poland. They will let us keep Czechoslovakia. They will let us keep Austria. It's like they were never going to let that happen.
No.
The only thing that the Allies were going to accept, just like with Japan, was unconditional surrender. Now, I don't think the film actually touches on that, but I think it's context that matters when telling the story of this film. I don't know where I'm going with all this monologuing I'm doing.
It's a we're one. Let's if we take a step back, it all rolls up to Tom Cruise.
It does. The one thing, oh, you know what? I actually know where I was going with this. So the tagline of this film on the poster is, quote, "Many saw evil. They tried to stop it," end quote. It's like,
That's funny.
that's not really what was happening. I like in the beginning when Stauffenberg is writing in his diary and he refers to Hitler as, quote, "the arch enemy of the entire world," end quote. It's like laying it on pretty thick.
That's a bit of a dramatization. That's funny.
But I get why they did it, right? They weren't making a docudrama. You can't make Tom Cruise's character a hero, but you can at least try to make him sympathetic, which is what
I'm
they succeeded in doing.
Look, it's like it's already hard enough, and I think Bryan Singer and the whole crew did a good job of it. How do you get the audience to root for a Nazi?
Right.
And like that's hard. Okay. And so if even just to kind of put it simply there, they had to build sympathetic characters and they had to break it down in a way that was relatable for the audience.
Yeah.
And with that, some historical inaccuracies are going to happen.
Yeah. But for the most part, it is worth pointing out this film is very accurate historically. I don't want to talk about Tom Cruise anymore. Let's talk about the rest of the cast,
Oh
because
yeah.
this is a murderer's row of great actors. Tom Wilkinson, Terrence Stamp, Kenneth Branagh, Tom Hollander, Bill Nighy, Eddie Izzard, Kevin McNally, Thomas Kretschmann. Amazing.
Great crew. I feel like it's just so fun to have such a cast like that where, you can pick any of those guys. Like they could be leads in their own films, right?
Oh, yeah. Many of
Yeah.
them have been.
And many have,
Yeah. It's so cool to see like Eddie Izzard in a role like this.
where one would listeners probably know more of their work through the more comedic roles.
Right, right. Yeah, he's a great actor, man. He's just, to your point, like he's a comedian. He's known for, his stage performances, but like it's just so random he would do a role like this.
Yeah, almost as surprising and dramatic turn as, well, actually kind of the opposite of John C. Reilly.
A little bit, yeah. I love Thomas Kretschmann in this movie. He's almost overqualified for this kind of role, right? He's basically he's like a reserve battalion commander in Berlin, right?
And I feel like it's in the eyes. I feel like there's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of look and a lot of just There's a lot of scenes where he's either staring out and you can either see the intensity of the scene just all through subtle eye movement or just eye gestures. And we really got that with his performance.
I mean, easily the most memorable scene for him is where he is going to arrest Goebbels, and Goebbels just hands him the phone, and you hear
Oh,
Hitler.
yeah.
He's like,
I
"Do you
hear Hitler.
recognize my voice?" And you see him straighten up, and he's like, "Yes, my Führer."
Yeah.
And it does a remarkable job of selling the fear that the Germans had for
Right.
the Führer.
Also, just like in general, this is with the film as well. The way that the film plays with lighting, makeup, like they look white as ghosts, or they look terrified.
Great costumes for sure. You know, we mentioned all the different factions in the German hierarchy. They all have the distinct uniforms. They're all similar, but they're all different at the same time. Back to the cast. So we mentioned the film Conspiracy. Kenneth Branagh, Kevin McNally, and Ian McNeice. They're all in that film. Ian McNeice has a very, very small role in this one. Anton, he plays the fat general who interrupts the coup. He's trying to find Tom Wilkinson's character, and he's just like, "This is treason. Hitler's alive. Hitler's alive," and they arrest him.
Yep.
That's Ian McNeice.
People may recognize McNeice from, we've talked about this. It was the Frank Herbert's Dune, the miniseries.
Yeah, he plays the
Yeah.
Baron.
Yep, he plays the Baron.
He's
Right.
great. He loves to ham it up.
Mhm.
I just watched Napoleon on a flight back from the UK recently. He has a very small role in Napoleon, but he plays the King of France.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's not a very good movie. We're gonna cover it eventually, but yeah, he's a pretty underrated character actor. Speaking of underrated, Tom Wilkinson, who is not underrated at all as an actor, he's probably one of the most highly regarded character actors of his generation. Rest in peace, by the way. He passed away recently. We've talked about him on the podcast before. This is one of his most underrated performances, actually. You know, rewatching this a couple times for this episode, I was really impressed by him here. I love the scene where Cruz and Bill Nighy meet him in his office. It's not very long. Really good dialogue. Remember, he's basically, he knows what they're trying to do, and he unplugs the phone because there's a bug in the phone. He's
And-
just so good at playing this role, this kind of role. He's a very much the opportunist.
I feel like there was part of the suspense of the film, if one's not as familiar of the details, is who is going to break or who is going to betray the operation. And I feel like with that suspense, you need characters that are showing that either they're opportunistic or that they're working at such high stakes. And I feel like you said, Wilkinson's performance is really able to capitalize on that.
He's an all-time great, man. He's probably one of my all-time favorite actors at this point. He's just one of those guys where he's really only given a lead performance a couple of times. I'm thinking about something like In the Bedroom. And there's probably some other stuff that he did in Britain that I'm not thinking of, but he's always a supporting role, and he's always makes the most of it. You're always drawn to him. You're always paying attention to everything that he's seeing, even as Juntao.
As Juntao.
Yeah. Juntao.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's
think about Juntao.
Gotta love me some Rush Hour.
Yeah. He's great. You just know he's the bad guy as soon as he shows up. You're like, that guy can't be good. We talked about Eddie Izzard. So Bill Nighy, Kevin McNally, Tom Hollander. I don't know what I just said there. And that guy, David Schofield, he plays Mr. Mercer in Pirates of the Caribbean. But all four of these guys are in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise.
Heavy hitters.
Yeah. Bill Nighy, another great. They're all of this. They're all great in this film. And I'm sure you caught Bernard Hill in the very beginning of the film in the Tunisian sequence, a.k.a. Theoden, a.k.a. Captain Smith of the Titanic. He gets killed real quick, but he asked Tom Cruise, what would you have me do? Had to be a Lord of the Rings reference, right?
Pretty spot on.
Yeah. Where was Gondor when the Westfold fell?
This makes me just want to watch extended cut.
They're so good. Lord of the Rings is one of those trilogies where you want to talk about it on a podcast because of just how awesome it is, but because why wasn't it better? We can't because it's so flawless.
But then we realize, wait, we can talk about whatever we want.
We can. We're going to have to talk about the Hobbit trilogy.
That's...
The listeners can't see this, but Anton just he just did a face palm because he's dreading it as much as I am.
Because that's just painful, man. That's just sad.
I was thinking about this recently. Someone who's going to be a guest on our podcast soon asked me this question. So we hated the Star Wars prequels, right? Like pretty much.
Basically.
We hated the Hobbit trilogy, right?
Yeah, goes without saying.
But why are the prequels fun to talk about and the Hobbit trilogy isn't?
I think, well, personally, I think it's less fun to talk about the prequel for The Hobbit because I feel like a couple things. One, reluctance. I don't think Peter Jackson actually really wanted to make those films. He was brought on last minute to direct.
He definitely didn't.
Yeah. And then just two, I never had hope that making 3 films was ever going to be good, and I was right. A lot of people were right. And it was just a cash grab, and that's just sad. Whereas when you have the prequel trilogy for Star Wars, there's a bit of hope there. At least it's newer concepts, but still not great.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I haven't watched the Hobbit trilogy in many years.
I mean, why'd they put Legolas in it, you know?
I don't know. You know, I've only seen all of them once.
You really don't need. I've seen the first and the second a couple times, and I refuse to watch the third again.
Battle of the Five Armies.
It's just so bad.
I've only seen them once, so at this point, maybe they are worth revisiting. I don't know.
The scenes that are taken directly from the books are the best parts.
Right.
That's all. And again, it's not a long book.
No, it's not. That's not going to be covered for a long time.
Well, I'll put a pin on that.
Yeah, we were all gung ho to cover the prequels, but the Hobbit, there's no love there.
There's just there really isn't. And
the prequels are fun to hate. I have to say that they're terrible movies.
But the fact that I think it's just not as fun to hate on the Hobbit trilogy. It's just more sad.
You know what it was? It was like with the prequels, we were angry. It was like the Hobbit, we were just disappointed.
Yeah, there we go. That's probably a better way to put it.
Back to Valkyrie. What is that? Is Valkyrie? Is that what we're talking about?
Oh, right.
Right. Anyway, so what's her name? Carice Van Houten. She played Stauffenberg's wife.
Melisandre from Game of Thrones.
Sure.
Pat, for any listeners that watch Game of Thrones, they're excited to hear her just because she was a bit of a smoke show on that series and is quite a lovely lady.
Okay. I am Googling this now, and I see what you mean. So she has a pretty thankless role here. Not really much to do except like kiss Tom Cruise and act concerned. I wonder if she had more screen time and they just trimmed it out.
I actually feel like it's better if they didn't try to include like some sort of forced romance angle that could have been more played out as more melodramatic. So,
I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah.
For sure. I just think they did the right job of like they acknowledged Stauffenberg. He had a wife. He had a family. They survived the war.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that went against Hitler, their families did not survive.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Hitler, I don't know the actor's name who plays him. Great job. Hitler is a weird character to play in any film just because of the enormity of his character, of who he was as a historical figure.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the obvious thing is that apart from really one recording, we only have official recordings of him. I mean, videos and speeches that his propaganda ministry recorded and published, right?
Right.
There's a lot written about him, but a lot of the historical Hitler remains a mystery, right? But whoever this actor was who played him, I should have looked that up, but I didn't. He does a really good job. The posture, the ego, the delusions of grandeur, the fear factor he really got. Everyone seems pretty intimidated by him. And here's the other thing that's very underrated about this guy who played Hitler. The speaking voice. It's that deep baritone speaking voice. Have you ever heard the recording of Hitler that factory owner made?
I can't recall. No.
It's the only unofficial recording of Hitler. So basically, early in the war, I think it was in Norway or Sweden, Hitler visited some kind of factory that was like being run by one of his friends, and the guy recorded the conversation. And Hitler did not know he was being recorded. And it just sounds like a normal conversation. He sounds like a pretty normal guy, but he has a pretty deep voice that does not sound like anything that he speaks, he doesn't sound anything like he does in one of his speeches. It's really interesting to hear, even if you don't speak German. You can look it up on YouTube. So his
Yeah,
normal everyday speaking voice was pretty low and pretty clear. And this actor who plays him in this film does a really good job of that.
yeah. I'm trying to think like even depictions of Hitler that are most memorable. I think a lot of people think of Downfall.
Bruno Gantz, great movie.
Yeah, yeah,
And like they show in that movie, his public persona was very different from his private one.
right. And then I feel like there's a lot that tries to kind of go around that same path. And then we have the other side of the spectrum, which was Taika Waititi and Jojo Rabbit.
I didn't see that one, but
Yeah,
I'm sure it was humorous.
quite satirical.
Yeah. That is going to bring us to the next reason why this wasn't better, which is, again, going to be very broad. It's the production. I like the quote from Supreme Chancellor Valorum, which is, remember, this is a military operation. Nothing ever goes according to plan.
And then they look at their uniforms and ask themselves, are we the baddies?
Are we the farmers? We teased this in the beginning, but part of what makes this movie so fascinating is how close they came to succeeding. I don't know how much this would have changed the outcome of the war, but it certainly would have saved millions of lives.
Yeah. Pulling out of the Eastern Front, knows how many thousands. But I feel like it's one of those things, one of the things that you mentioned early on in today's episode that still has me thinking is how close this was to a like actual real life, like a like an alternate timeline could have easily been created.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. It's like if they had killed Hitler and the war had been, at least the war in Europe had ended. I don't know how much the outcome would have changed though, right? It's like I think the Cold War still would have happened. It just would have started a year sooner. That's just my theory though. I don't know.
Timelines moved up by events, full surrender resulting in like more streamlined war trials, except for those that fully complied.
It's possible.
Whoever still ended up being hired by the U.S. government was still hired by the U.S. government.
Oh, Operation Paperclip?
Yes.
Funny you say that. I'm actually reading a book on that right now.
Yeah. Actually, there'd be less Germans in like Argentina.
Probably, yes. Yeah, maybe we wouldn't have gotten the boys from Brazil.
Oh, maybe.
Back to this movie and the characters. So Terrence Stamp, he plays General Beck, aka General Zod, aka Supreme Chancellor Valorum. So when he's briefing the group on the plan for Valkyrie, this is about 45 minutes into the film. I was thinking about this. There's like 40 people in that room. It's like that's a lot of people to trust with this kind of conspiracy. I'm kind of amazed that they were able to actually get to the point where they launched the operation without being betrayed.
Which is part of the suspense of the film, I think.
Yeah.
Very on the nose.
Does a really good job of it.
Yeah, it's like at any point it could be blown up.
I was reading about his character, the real life General Beck. Did you read anything about him?
No.
So he did shoot himself in the head. He didn't succeed.
Oh no, that's ugh.
They had to finish him off.
Oh, what a way to go.
Yeah. He's an interesting historical figure. So during the first few years of Hitler's rise to power, Beck was the chief of the German general staff, but he ended up being removed because he refused to swear personal allegiance to Hitler.
So already just kind of a malcontent.
Yeah.
But I think like these are all good examples of this isn't the tagline of the movie. They saw evil and they did something about it. I think it was more so they saw management and wanted a different manager in place.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. They wanted Germany run a different way. They did not like the direction where Hitler was taking things. That's probably what I just said. Should have said earlier instead of rambling for 2 minutes, but whatever. Question about Eddie Izzard's character. He plays General Feigable, Felgeibel, whatever. So he was the communications officer at the Wolf's Lair. And he was like their inside man. And his job was to cut off communications and isolate the Wolf's Lair, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what their expectation was, right? So he cuts off communications. There's a very short period of blackout, right? But like, wouldn't they immediately try to communicate with Berlin? And then they would realize the phones are out and they would just go to the telephone center and restore the communications and arrest him. I don't understand what's the plan there. It's like he cuts the phones off. Remember, he tells all the soldiers,
Mhm.
he's like, sever all communications, and they're like, okay. It's like immediate red flag.
Look, it was already such a complex operation to begin with. Even just the aspect of cutting off communication all the way to the point of method of assassination.
Yeah, he should have used that second plastic explosive.
Or they could have come up with an even more elaborate way to murder Hitler or to assassinate Hitler should have been as elaborate as the diamond smuggling ring in Diamonds Are Forever.
Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd are just on standby to like tie up loose ends.
They end up using a scorpion.
Oh, oh, Shady Tree. We loved your act. It's a deep cut. I don't even have this in the notes, but I know we're making light of the situation, but it does kind of crack me up how like the bomb goes off and Stauffenberg's just like, he's probably dead.
Yeah, exactly. I
I'm not
remember
gonna
that.
I'm not gonna waste 30 seconds and verify that Hitler died. I'm just gonna assume he's dead.
And that's why they say due diligence is very important.
It's so much tension in the movie. It's really it's so well filmed and well edited, but it's like when the bomb goes off, he's like 50 feet away. It's like, dude, just run in and check. Just
Mhm.
check.
But
It's like,
just
no, he
but the
can't do
shot of
it.
just like, nope, just gonna start walking.
Really good cinematography in this film. There's a lot of like really creative shots, I think. The one that stood out to me the most is when the sentry puts the cigarette out on the mosquito
Mm.
on his hand. I thought that was really good. Nothing's ever out of focus. Also, great use of CGI. There's a lot of invisible CGI in this film. Every shot that Tom Cruise is in with his hand missing has some kind of CGI. You don't even think about it.
That's true. It's subtle, and
Real subtle.
you're not supposed to notice it if it's done well.
Look, I don't want to like prop up Bryan Singer too much, but like he knew how to make a film, man.
The man knows story structure.
He's really good at set pieces and spatial geography. I had a good sense of like where everyone was and the distance between locations. That's hard to do in this type of film, and he did a good job with it. And we've been hinting at this earlier, but like he did a remarkable job with the paranoia and the suspense, the sense of not knowing who to trust or what can be said. I think it's just really well done stuff.
And I really cannot stress enough how difficult it is in any capacity to create like a sympathetic Nazi character or just to
Yeah.
have the audience have to sympathize for Nazis. Actually, in retrospect, probably that's could be part of the reason why it's so hard for some audiences to even like get into this film because that concept is hard. But considering that, I think that they did a really great job with being able to tell that story effectively.
I agree. The way it's told is where they succeeded, right? I was thinking about this on the last rewatch. It really does play out like a Mission Impossible movie, and I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I really like the scene where the players explain how the mission's going to unfold. You get the bald guy who's explaining how the plastic explosive works, and then Stauffenberg is explaining the details of Operation Valkyrie, right? He's like,
Mm-hmm.
once we confirmed Hitler's dead, you do this, we initiate this protocol, the reserve army will move into this section of Berlin and cut this off. We will arrest all of the SS guys, yada yada yada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They use flashbacks, flash forwards, diagrams, blueprints. It's like the best kind of exposition. And then once the bomb actually explodes in the Wolf's Lair, the pacing is riveting. And it does not let up until the end when they're ultimately, captured and executed. But it really is impressive how much tension there is, even when you know how the story is going to end.
Which is again just shows how impressive the storytelling is and
Yeah.
how effective they did being able to still capture that energy.
It's the one Mission Impossible that failed.
Ooh, sad.
It's sad. Yeah. It's like, but they're Nazis. They're
Yeah.
not Nazis, but they have swastikas on.
I think like one of the aspects that they really drew upon was taking on the establishment, but then rebuttal even to myself, well, they were just trying to put together a different establishment.
Back to Bryan Singer real quick. And you were touching on this a bit earlier. One of the things he does a really good job of is, I think, very similar to the second X-Men movie. There's a lot of characters in this, and everyone gets Other than Tom Cruise, everyone gets pretty limited screen time, and yet all of the major players are two-dimensional characters with clear motivations and goals. Bryan
Right.
Singer is really good at ensemble pieces.
It's like being able to draw out the best of the individual characters to move the plot forward versus being bogged down by trying to tell the exposition of every individual character.
Yeah. Everyone seems like a real character. There's
Yeah,
no,
like
like, cardboard characters where you're like, "What's this person doing in this movie?" Like,
yeah,
even
like
like Ready I don't even know the guy's name who Thomas Kreitzman plays, like, the
mhm,
reserve army battalion commander.
mhm.
He somehow gets characterization, like, we see him swimming in the pool, we see him at the barber shop, and he's like a real character, and he makes that offhand comment to his lieutenant, like, "I know we're being used, I know this is part of a coup, I just can't figure out, like, what side of it's on." It's like, I don't know, just he does the most with his lines, and it's all in the writing.
Mhm.
It's all there.
But there was a I will have to say that this film was missing Nightcrawler, who was a very important part of the real life history that occurred.
Alan Cumming
Yeah, when Nightcrawler infiltrated the Wolf's lair and was this close to assassinating Hitler
with the knife.
with a knife.
It does make you wonder why they didn't just shoot Hitler in the head.
Seemed like that seemed like the simpler solution.
I mean, I know they had to, like, leave their guns behind and everything, but it's like, eh. Like I said earlier, it's like the bomb goes off and Stauffenberg's like, he's probably dead.
Well, I mean, I would assume. I mean, I think even reading just like the same level of protocol of protection, like the Secret Service has for the president, they were doing the same thing for Hitler.
Yeah, they were. But he was able to get that bomb in there pretty easily.
So they weren't doing that great of a job.
I don't know. Dicey. After the conspirators knew they failed, they didn't make any attempt to flee. I thought that was interesting. They just, like, stayed in their office. They're like, meh.
Yeah,
Man, the retribution scenes, pretty harrowing. They're,
very brutal,
they're being
and
hung by piano wire. It's like, geez.
the way that it plays out as well, it doesn't slow down.
No.
No.
No, that one of the best things about this movie, I think, is how it ends.
Hmm.
There's no dramatic shootout. There's no hero ball. They just get captured, and within a couple of minutes, they're being lined up against the wall.
Hmm.
What's his name? General Fromm, Tom Wilkinson's character.
Hmm.
He did them all a favor by having them shot. Because there's that line that really stood out to me. Earlier in the film, someone says, "If you get caught, the SS will pull you apart like warm bread."
Yep, that's right.
Being shot is a much better fate than what the SS would have done to them.
Yeah, no kidding.
What did you think of the music by John
I
Ottman?
I thought very underrated. It
Yeah,
was really, really
effective.
very effective.
Not necessarily the most memorable score, but very
Mhm.
effective in building tension. I forget he would edit the films for Bryan Singer too, which is pretty unusual. Where you have
Oh,
a guy scoring the film and cutting it, very unusual. Does a great job with it. Tight, very tight. Before we wrap this up, there's one thing I want to mention, which I found odd. So, probably the most high profile person caught up in the July 20th plot was Rommel, Erwin Rommel.
mhm.
He was one of the most famous generals of World War II. He committed suicide because he was wrapped up in this plan. There's no mention of him whatsoever in this film, which I thought was interesting because how deeply he was involved in this plot is a subject of debate, but the implication was enough to cost him his life, like I mentioned. Due to his enormous popularity with the German people, Hitler spared his family in exchange for him committing suicide. I just find it interesting how he's not mentioned in this film at all,
That's actually like a pretty big piece,
right?
but I'm actually like knowing that I wasn't aware of that, knowing that it does kind of make it very like, yeah, curious. And I wonder if it was more so fitting it into the storyline of do we make someone within even closer within the inner circle of Hitler as one of the main characters in the film? Maybe just the story time.
I don't know. He's such a famous name, and you would have thought he would be somehow like involved in this film, but he's not.
Yeah.
Well, Anton, we talked about why Valkyrie wasn't better. We mentioned the poor marketing. We mentioned the Tom Cruise of it all. Anything to add before we wrap this up?
I'm ready to give our assessments.
Alrighty, I will go first. Do not believe any of the negative hype about this film. The poor marketing and the multiple delays did not help this film out one bit. For me personally, this is everything you could want in this type of film. It's unpretentious, it's thrilling, it's well crafted. It's a pretty faithful version of actual events that happened. And despite knowing the outcome, I think it's genuinely exciting. There's a lot of tension here. There's some spy DNA mixed in. You have a really impressive cast, all of whom deliver quality performances. Bryan Singer's name may be mud these days, but the man knew how to direct a film, especially a thriller. I am a sucker for a good World War II movie. I think this is a really good, underrated movie. If you're interested in World War II, I think a lot of people are, this is a movie to check out. I would definitely recommend this. It's a pretty important event in the war, even if it didn't have the outcome that its conspirators intended it to. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I really enjoyed it on the rewatch. And like I said, I would definitely recommend this. I do think it deserves reassessment, probably the definition of an underrated movie. It might be Bryan Singer's best film, in my opinion. You could maybe say that's The Usual Suspects, but this is right up there. I rate this a B plus. I really liked it.
Very fair assessment, Pat. And I feel like you made a lot of the same points that I'm just going to echo here, is that underrated is the best way to put this film. I feel like it really creeps up on you how captivating this film is. And I don't think that when we look at the history of the marketing and the history of the film being released at a time that just did not do it justice, that doesn't really set it up for success. And I feel like the film has a lot more merit than a lot of the criticisms that I've seen for the film. Because if we look at I think like some primary reasons around historical inaccuracies and Tom Cruise, I feel like it's very fair to say that historical inaccuracies, well, you know what, there has to be some there has to be some decisions made, and for the sake of being able to tell effective story and otherwise still very accurate. And as well as Tom Cruise, I think this is just another that is just another assessment where I feel like Tom Cruise just maybe is being assessed a little harshly. So looking at this film and giving it like a thorough watch for the podcast, I think that, yeah, this film's really underrated. And I really do recommend to our listeners to give this film a watch. I would love to hear people's thoughts. If this is something that you hadn't seen before, what are your thoughts are? Because, yeah, I feel like history will look back and say that this was a film that may have flown under the radar. For me, this film is a solid B.
All right. Well, folks, that is it for Valkyrie. We are going to be back next week with an anniversary film. However, before you hear next week's episode, there may be a surprise episode for a new film that's in theaters.
Yeah, and we'll just go ahead and hint and say total change of like tone.
Yeah, completely different, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, who knows? Maybe they end up throwing in things there that,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah,
You never know.
we'll see.
From all of us here at Why Wasn't It Better, that's it for Valkyrie. We will see you next week for A Passage to India, or maybe something else before that. Take care. Thanks for listening to Why Wasn't It Better. If you've made it this far, it's safe to assume that you like what you hear. If you have not already done so, please hit that subscribe button and become a follower wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you really like what you hear, you can contribute to our podcast monetarily and sign up for our Patreon. So whether you're commuting, chilling at home, or embarking on a nostalgia-fueled movie adventure, make Why Wasn't It Better your go-to podcast companion.